Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Tracey Hill, and I'll be presenting some thoughts on what online tools are available for survey researchers. The presentation will take, or my presentation will take about 18-20 minutes, and I'll be covering 7 different areas, and we will be going through them fairly quickly. Okay, so this is an overview of findings from a review that I conducted in April to June this year of online dashboard products and online reporting products. And by this I mean tools which enable the data from a research study to be accessible directly online by means of tables, charts, and other visuals which are interactive and can be drilled down. They don't necessarily have to look like a dashboard. The key thing is that the data has been uploaded online in some way. My presentation is therefore generally more relevant to quantitative researchers, but there are some aspects of the other presentations, particularly to do with text analytics, for example, which will be relevant to qualitative reporting as well. Okay, so very quickly, just a few words about myself. As Arthur said, I'm an ICG member. I started as a graduate trainee in 1995 and worked up to director level, mainly for companies that are now part of Ipsos Mori. I've been freelancing for a year, specialising in the reporting of survey research. I can offer report automation. That's one thing that I do, both simple auto charting and more complex reports, for example, where multiple reports are required, that include things like ranking and logos and statistical significance and so on. I spend a lot of time online looking at the whole data visualization thing from the point of view of how new approaches to data presentation can be applied to survey research. I use VBA and other programming techniques to manipulate shapes and icons and so on to try to bring something new to reporting in PowerPoint rather than just standard charts and tables. And I can offer clickable online interactives generated in PowerPoint, but that look really good on a web page and can be embedded. And that's something that would work for qualitative as well as quantitative reporting. And then, of course, I've done this review of online reporting tools, so I'm quite familiar with what's on offer in this area. And I have accessed trial versions of most of the products that I reviewed, so I have actually used them in the flesh, as it were. Okay, so thinking about when you would need an online dashboard. In a webinar a couple of weeks ago, Ray Pointer identified DIY as a trend in market research at the moment, not just DIY in terms of survey tools like SurveyMonkey, but specific aspects of the research process becoming more self-accessed. And it's all part of the EasyJet Expedia model, where people are getting more used to accessing tools that allow them to do things themselves. And I think reporting is part of this. Now, is this a good thing for survey research reporting? On the plus side, users being able to access the results directly, in theory, means they can get the figures they need without having to go back and ask for extra runs and so on. They can navigate around the data and use it independently. There's also a lot of talk about real-time results, which is possible because data can be available as soon as the file is uploaded. I've mentioned Google Analytics here because that's been hailed as setting new expectations with its sort of standard dashboard, which makes it really easy and intuitive to get the information that you're looking for. On the minus side, some users don't actually really want the data itself. They just want to know what the results are saying for their business or area of responsibility. Not everyone has the inclination or time to explore the data themselves hands-on. Real-time results might not necessarily mean a lot because you really have to wait for the survey to complete before you have a full data set. Much of the value that researchers add to the process comes from telling a story and from being there to tell it, of course. I'm sure most people listening will agree with that. So there are pros and cons of this DIY approach. One of the things, in my opinion, the single feature of online dashboards which is of the most value, is that it enables research to be made available to users in different locations who have differing needs from the research. On a lot of surveys I've worked on, most of what is produced using PowerPoint is never actually presented to anyone at all. It's circulated to various people throughout an organisation who need to see it. And for projects like that, I think online reporting is definitely worth considering. For example, a strategic marketing director will want an overview of a brand and advertising tracker, looking at which markets are strong, which are weak, and so on. An insight team will want to be able to explore the data and do analysis on behalf of other people, and they'll be wanting to customize and download the data. But a country manager would only want to look at their particular country and would probably want something they can look at just once, maybe take along to a meeting, and it will tell them what they need to know without them having to go digging around for it. So both of these need sets can be delivered using an online dashboard tool by customizing the way in which people access it. A good example of this is the GP patient survey, which you can find simply by Googling GP patient survey. Members of the public can look at their own GP practice and get a very simple view of how that practice is performing compared to other surgeries with the icons that you can just about see there. For staff and anyone else who's more interested, there's an analysis tool which is more customizable and allows analysis by clinical commissioning group as well as practice, and you can add in different comparisons, you can download the data, you can even turn the weighting off, that kind of thing if you want. So the same survey online, but very different uses of the online tool. Okay, so how can you go about setting up an online dashboard? So if there's a requirement for a serviced dashboard, there are lots of companies who will quote simply to take your respondent level data and build a dashboard for you to your specification. When I asked serviced dashboard providers specific questions about functionality, they basically all said that they could do anything. So the key is to be really clear about what's needed and get a few different quotes for it. But basically they will go away and do whatever you want. My review does cover a number of companies that offer serviced dashboards. Using a self-serve tool to upload the data and create the dashboard yourself will save some money. It's worth considering, and I can talk more later about what else self-serve dashboard tools can do, because for an independent researcher there are ways in which it might change the whole process of research, analysis and reporting. Most self-serve tools have some kind of limitations in terms of what they can do, and this is generally reflected in the price. However, a lot of companies which have a self-serve tool will also set up the whole dashboard for you if you want them to, and many of them can include some additional functionality above and beyond what the tool can offer for a particular project, and of course there'd be an additional fee to pay for that, but it does mean a bit of extra flexibility. Okay, so I just want to talk a little about the research process and how the functionality of dashboard tools can be used to simplify it in some ways. Here are the stages needed to create a dashboard. Respondent level data, for example an SPSS file, is uploaded. It's usually respondent level data. This then needs to be configured so that multiple response variables are grouped together, for example. Otherwise, each response to a multiple response question will be in a different chart, which isn't what's wanted. And this is also where you can add in additional variables such as nets, additional age breaks, and so on. So once that's done, you then need to create the individual objects that go into the dashboard itself, i.e. charts and tables. This includes selecting how they can be drilled down, what the filters are, what the comparisons are, significance and weighting, and so on. Then you have to create the dashboard itself and decide where and how these objects are to be displayed on the dashboard, the layout, the additional text and visuals, and so on. And then there's also the separate stage of setting up the user logins to define who has access to what. Okay, so those are the steps to create a dashboard. Now this is the traditional survey process simplified. A respondent file is aggregated into data tables with nets and so on added, and this is then used to create usually a PowerPoint report, often by copying and pasting data from the tables. Okay, so if you add an online dashboard as a completely separate part of the process, then basically parts of the process are being done twice in parallel. As well as the DP route, data is uploaded through the tool and configured in a very similar way. Tables and charts are created for the dashboard as well as within PowerPoint for offline reporting. So if you look at it like this, a dashboard can look like an expensive and time-consuming addition. However, if we were to utilize the functionality of the dashboard tool, we could potentially use it for all our reporting needs, because the ability to create aggregated tables is built in. Instead of a separate DP process, the tables could essentially be made within the dashboard tool, which they have to be anyway to be part of the dashboard. The tables can then be downloaded into Excel for any reporting. Alternatively, since the dashboard tools also require charts and tables to be created, it may be possible to go a step further and use the tool not only for aggregating the data, but charting it as well. New data can be uploaded after the dashboard and the charts have been configured, and all the settings will be saved. So it's basically a form of automation. The dashboards will generally download into PowerPoint or Excel, and it's usually possible to download chart and table objects into a preloaded template that's set up with all the formatting that you need. It is worth mentioning that with a lot of the tools you can download charts into PowerPoint, but they're not necessarily editable once you've downloaded them. I will come back to that point later. Okay, so if a dashboard tool were to be used in that way, let's have a think about what kind of things it would need to do. First of all, I just want to talk about market research versus non-market research specific tools. One thing to bear in mind is that many of the dashboard products being marketed are not market research specific. These dashboards will be set up with transactional data in mind and will be used first and foremost for large organizations to make sense of their own data. They can be used for survey research, but they're not specifically set up for it. That means that the data needs to be flattened. That means transformed into a database-like structure, and specific calculations would need to be set up to show things like base sizes and significant differences. My review does include a couple of these, but most tools are specific to market research and are set up to expect an SPSS or similar file, where each respondent's data is on a single row. Several of these tools are essentially online cross-tabbing and analysis tools, which have had a dashboard function added. So they are set up to easily handle market research specific requirements, such as displaying bases and significance. Okay, so on this slide and on the next three, I'm showing some of the features it's useful for a dashboard product to have. The review document, which I'll display the link to later, gives more detail on this, and it actually goes through each area for each of the tools that I've reviewed. The stars show how common that functionality is. In terms of how the data can be configured once it's loaded, most tools will allow the user to relabel variables and values. Most have convenient ways of grouping multiple response variables. Some enable this to be done programmatically by looking for particular indicators in the variable name, which could save time for big data sets. And most of the tools allow the user to create new combinations for nets. However, I did come across at least one where it required the nets to have been created before the data was uploaded. Most tools allow you to choose whether to apply weighting to each specific dashboard object. Displaying bases and hiding data with a low base is usually a function, but it works in different ways for different tools, and it may not necessarily be very customizable. Similarly, for displaying significant differences, usually it's there, but you might not have a great deal of choice about exactly how the significant differences are displayed. Excuse me. In terms of the dashboard itself, most tools allow you to display objects from different data sets on the same dashboard, which is quite important. Although there are a couple where the data does need to be in exactly the same structure, so that's something that's worth asking about. All the tools have some functionality for customizing views. It's worth checking how detailed this can go, i.e. whether it's a matter of being able to hide particular pages or datasets or variables, or whether you can go a stage further and show different users different cuts of the data based on particular responses. For example, showing different users only the data for their country, for example. Okay, and then this final area is all about what the dashboard actually looks like. And it's a matter of how much these formatting settings can be changed, and this is something that varies quite a lot. Some of the dashboards you have to select a template with placeholders for objects, so you don't have entirely free range to place any object anywhere on the dashboard. Most of them you can put it in text and images, but as I say, not necessarily anywhere you want. I would say probably the majority of dashboard products, they all enable downloading into PowerPoint, but the majority of them, the tables and charts, come out as pictures and aren't editable within PowerPoint. This means that if you wanted to edit them, you would have to do so in the dashboard software itself and then download it again. Alternatively, you can download into Excel and create and edit PowerPoint from there. Excuse me. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay, so very quickly, just to name the products that I've actually included in the review. The self-serve products, which are market research specific, there were 6 of those. The first 2 on the list are the tools offered by Pete and Frederick, who are presenting after me. Data Liberation is a tool which uses Excel as its interface for creating the dashboard itself. Intellect's MarketSite and Q are all cross-tabbing and analysis tools with a dashboard element, and I would say that all of these are definitely worth looking at for the independent researcher. And I would just add at the moment that MarketSite is offering ICG members a small discount. I've included 5 providers of service dashboards, and the reason for including these is that they all have experience of or specialize in the market research industry. So they are all mentioned in the review as well. As I said, when I asked them what they can do, most of them say that they can do anything that's required, basically. So that's kind of what that section looks like. Now, in terms of non-market research specific tools, I did look at a couple of them. I didn't focus on this area because actually there were lots. And I wanted to focus on the market research specific tools. Tableau is worth a particular mention because it's a very high profile product within the data visualization scene. And I did just want to mention the Tableau gallery, which is a really good place to go for inspiration. Hello? Oh, thank you. Back to the Tableau gallery. Yeah, it's what people are doing with Tableau is actually pretty amazing in terms of the visualizations that are being put together. So the Tableau gallery is a really good place to go if you're just wanting some new ideas for how to visualize something. I did ask the UK Tableau salesperson who was using Tableau in the UK in terms of market research agencies, and he told me that hundreds of market research companies were using Tableau. I haven't come across anyone using Tableau for survey research reporting, but if anybody else has, then do let me know, because I'd be really interested to find out if anyone is actually using Tableau for market research. Right, just let me go to the final section now if I can. Here we go, costs. Right, just something very brief about costs. Like everything, it's a sliding scale depending on requirements. Most service dashboards seem to start at around the £2,000 to £5,000 mark for something pretty basic. I got the impression that most dashboards that are actually commissioned tend to come in at more than that, £10,000 or more. Because they tend to be used for bigger projects. The costs for self-serve are structured in a number of different ways. Sometimes it's just a license cost. Sometimes there are elements reflecting the number of projects, the number of users, the number of people who have to look at the dashboard, how long it needs to be live, the hosting cost per month, how big it is, and so on. It seemed to me that the cheapest you could do a dashboard using these self-serve tools was around the 1,500 to 2,000 mark. And that would be for something pretty straightforward. So that's a sort of rough idea, I think, of how much you should budget for a dashboard. But the other speakers may have something else to say on that, though I'm not sure. Okay, so that's all I was going to say, really. Thanks very much for listening, and I've just put the URL there if you wanted to go and download the actual review from our website.